Ralph's introduction was very on point, though, with regard to my background and experience with regard to using the right tools for the job. And I think that's a great way to put it when you talk about a tool like Bower. Some of you that are here may have used Bower before. Some of you may have only heard of it and never tried it, and hopefully you're here to either learn some more about it with regards to some things you may not have known about it, or if you haven't used it, hopefully to try and determine whether or not Bower is the right tool for you, because it may or may not be. Bower is the reason that I'm talking about Bower here today is not because I'm part of the development team of Bower. I've never contributed to it or anything like that, and not because it's absolutely the greatest thing out there, but because in the projects that we have used Bower on, we found it to be really effective at saving us time. And that's kind of what package managers are for. They're intended to simplify managing the libraries and dependencies that you use to build your applications. And so we're going to talk today about how Bower can help you do that with your web projects. So we're going to get to know it a little bit. Again, as Ralph said, my name is Bob Yexley. I'm a senior JavaScript engineer at Depend2. And there's my blog where I occasionally write, and you can follow me on Twitter if you would like. Some of the things we're going to talk about today is just for those that aren't familiar with it, we're going to talk about what it is, the alternatives to using Bower. We're going to talk about the benefits to it. We're going to talk about how to use it, and then if you've got some packages out there yourself that you've been wondering about the best way to get out there and share with the community, Bower is a great way to do that. And we're going to walk through how to create and maintain your own package with Bower. I just want to be clear on this as far as what you guys are seeing. You're not seeing my go-to-training control panel over the slides, are you?
For attendees.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, so what is Bower? Bower is a package manager for the web. That is a quote from Bower's website that is kind of vague, so I hope to expound on that a little bit. I like to describe Bower as a tool that helps you manage the packages and assets that you use to implement your front-end web development projects. And when I say manage, I mean things like download them, update them, delete them, etc. And when I say packages, I mean assets. So Bower is a package manager for web development assets, meaning not exclusive to JavaScript assets. That's one of the primary things that you get with it, but you can also manage things like images and CSS files and actual HTML content, templates, if you will. Anything that your package that you're sharing through Bower might offer is an asset that Bower can manage. You can find more information about it in general at their website, bower.io. It's also an open source project. You can find it on GitHub, and they do have a Twitter account that you can follow as well, where they publish updates about new releases to the package and that sort of thing. But it's not real chatty. It's just very informative. So it's a good way to get information about Bower. So we're going to talk about the alternative to Bower, and this is, I will hope that talking about the alternative to it is going to help shed some light on some of the benefits, and that's where we'll go afterwards. But some of the alternatives, some of you might remember back before the days of Bower or any other sort of package manager tools, if you needed to use something like jQuery or more specifically, I'm going to use the example of Backbone.js a lot in this presentation because it's got dependencies, so it's a good example. But if you were going to use Backbone.js in a web development project, back in the day, you'd have to browse to backbonejs.com and download the version that you needed, whether it was the the production, the minified version, or the unminified development version. But if you want to use Backbone.js, it also depends on _JS to function. So you then have to also browse to _js.com and download it and drop it into your application. And if you're going to use the sync functionality, it depends on either jQuery or Zepto.js or something like that. So you'd have to browse there and download that as well. So was it difficult? Not necessarily, but after a while, and especially after using Bower for a little while, you start to see where a process like that for managing your assets gets to be a little bit cumbersome. And so that takes us into some of the other alternatives. Bower is certainly not the only package manager for the web out there. There's also NPM if you're using something like Browserify. There's a new one called SPM, which stands for Static Package Manager. Jam.js has been around for a while. JSPM.io, JavaScript Package Manager. Component.js from TJ Holowychuk, and I'm sure there's others as well. So there's alternatives, but Bower is the one that has been, in my experience anyway, the most widely adopted, the most active community around it. And from what I've seen, by far the most, I almost did say Bower, didn't I? By far the most number of packages available for it. So it makes it a popular package manager for the web. And you get some benefits with that. There's a number of benefits. First of all, installing, updating, and removing packages is dead simple. Bower is a command line interface tool. You can go to the command line, and I'll demonstrate this a little bit later. But you go to the command line, it's very, very simple. It is say Bower install jQuery, Bower install Backbone, Bower install whatever library you want to use. And the really nice thing about that is that it manages dependencies for you, which anybody that has dug into the meat of Bower as a library knows that it's not perfect in the way that it manages dependencies. It's got some quirks to it. But in my experience, it gets the job done effectively. It's been argued that Bower is just nothing more than a downloader. Well, even if that is all that you get out of it, in my experience, that alone is enough to save you a little bit of time and effort. Because if I wanted to download a tool that had multiple dependencies and install it with Bower, Bower is smart enough to pull down all those dependencies and make them available for you as well, rather than having to browse to multiple different websites or something. And the third benefit that I've found with, and probably one of the lesser known benefits with Bower, is this notion of discovery. So in a little bit, when we get into how to use it, we're going to talk a little bit about using the Bower search command to search the Bower registry. And when you do a search for, say, something like Bower search Backbone, you're going to get Backbone.js in the results, but then you're also going to get a whole slew of plugins that are available for Backbone that have the word Backbone in the name that you may have never even seen or heard of before. And that could be, I found that to be really handy. I've discovered some extensions and some libraries that turned out to be really, really useful that I had never even heard of outside of using Bower search. So discovery is a benefit that I've learned to really take advantage of with Bower. So let's talk about a little bit about how to use it. We're gonna talk about installing it, how to search for packages, how to find packages that you want to use, getting detailed information about packages, not just ones that are available in the registry, but also the ones that you have installed in your project. We're going to talk about how to configure a project to use Bower, installing packages, updating packages that are already been installed, and using the cache so you can use it when you don't have an internet connection, and then integrating with build tools. First thing that you'll need to know is that Bower is a Node.js module, so you have to install it with NPM. Cue the joke about installing a package manager with another package manager with another package manager, etc., etc. Package managerception, right? It is what it is. Bower is useful whether you've got to install it with another package manager or not. It depends on Node. The nice thing about that is installing it with npm is really, really simple. You open up a command line, you execute npm install -g Bower. It's recommended that you install it globally, so it's available to all your projects. And that's it. You're ready to go. And once it's installed, you can start searching for packages. And there's two primary ways that you can search for packages. There is the web interface, which is like any other package manager. It's a website that has a search box that allows you to search for it. And it's got some benefits, the web interface does. There's some additional information that you can see about packages through the web interface that you don't get from the command line search, but primarily because of the fact that you're going to be using Bower from the command line, using the CLI tool is the one that's most often used. And it's really simple to do. Just do a Bower search and then a keyword like backbone for the package that you're looking for. And this is what I was talking about with the discovery. You'll notice that you get backbone here, but you also get backbone AMD, backbone marionette, backbone stick-it. All of these extensions to backbone you'll see in the list of results for your Bower search. So that's how you search for a package. And again, I'll demonstrate this here in a little bit, pending running out of time. So try and get through this stuff as quick as I can so I can show you what all that looks like. Getting detailed information. If you want to know specifically, like, are there what versions of Backbone are available? Maybe you're working with you know, a browser that requires a specific version of a library. You can say Bower info backbone, and it will give you all of this information specific to that library. It gives you the name, the home page, so you can verify is this in fact the Backbone JS that I'm looking for. It's the one maintained by Jeremy Ashkenas. The current version of it is 1.1.0. The available versions, it'll list all of them. And then you can request information for a specific version as well by including the version number with the library name, the hash symbol, and then the version that you're looking for. So that's a useful way to get specific information about a specific version of a package as well. The nice thing about this is that the information that you get back will also show you the dependencies as well. So this is effectively, this output that you'll see here is effectively the information that is in the bower.json file associated with the package. And as far as dependencies, it'll show you right here that it requires jQuery and _JS. So you're going to get those with it when you install this particular library. Listing packages that you have installed in a project. This is another way that you can get information. If you're curious about what all packages are installed for your current project, in the directory where, from the command line, when you're in the directory where your project lives, if you run Bower list, it's going to tell you, this is the name of your project, this is the path where it's at, and these are all of the libraries that Bower is tracking for your project and their dependencies. So it shows it to you in a hierarchical display here, so you can see that you're using jQuery here and you're using Sycamore, and Sycamore has also pulled in jQuery with it at a specific version as well. So there's some redundancy then. When I talked about there's some quirks involved, it doesn't keep track of what libraries you might already have installed. And if you pull in a library that has dependencies that are already in your list of dependencies for your project, it will pull them in as well. So there, you do get a little bit of redundancy with that, but I have yet to actually run into a situation where that caused major problems. Configuring your project is really, really simple. I debated whether or not to even add a slide here for creating your own bower.json file manually, but running Bower init is so simple that it just didn't even make sense to talk about creating it manual. I've done that before, and you can do it. You can just create a bower.json file in your project and enter the information that you need in it, but it's so much simpler to just go to a command line, run Bower init. It prompts you with a bunch of questions like your name, the version that you want to start with, the author, the license, all of this stuff, and it generates a bower.json for you in seconds. It's a super easy, quick and easy way to get going to configure your project to use Bower. Installing packages is also very, very simple. It's as simple as executing Bower install and the name of the library that you want to use. If you want to install a specific version of it, again, you can use this hash syntax followed by the version number that you want to install, and it'll install that specific version. This one is key. Adding the -- save flag after the install command will automatically update your bower.json for you. So if you just run bower install jQuery and then push your repository, say, to GitHub, and a team member downloads it and runs bower install, it's not going to do anything for you. It's not going to install jQuery for them, because jQuery needs to be in the dependency list in your bower.json file before that'll work for other users. So it's important to always include this save flag with your install. There is, I saw on Twitter, there's a way that you can configure preferences for a project with a .bower.rc file, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And I saw somewhere on Twitter a while back that there was a way that you could configure an option in your bower.rc file to automatically save when you install a package. But aside from source diving, I have not been able to find any documentation on that. So I will mention that casually here and say, don't quote me on it, because I'm not confident that that is a supported configuration flag. But it would be nice if they do that, because it's a little bit cumbersome, because there are a few situations that I can think of where you would want to install a package without actually updating your bower.json file. It's really useful. So remember that when you're installing your package. And then the other really nice thing is you can also use Bower to install packages that aren't necessarily registered in their package registry. So you can say Bower install, whatever you want to call it in your bower.json file, and then equals, and give it the get endpoint to the package. So if you find a library that's just out there on GitHub that you want to include in your project, you can use Bower to install and uninstall that project with this command right here, which is really useful. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but that's all because Bower is built on top of Git. We'll talk, as I said, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. This is where I want to pause for just a moment and talk about package version numbers, because this can get a little bit tricky. We talked over here about how to install packages, and this relies pretty heavily on understanding how Bower recognizes the version numbers for the packages that you have installed and what impact that can have on your project if you're not careful about how you specify which versions you want. Some of you might have been there. I did a training earlier this year that used this exact same slide deck, and I didn't include these slides in it. Since I originally wrote this presentation and have had some more experience with Bower, this particular topic, and the reason I put these slides in here, is because this is an area that is a real gotcha for Bower, where we've actually been bitten by not understanding how this works. So Bower requires the use of semantic versioning for its packages. And if you come back and look at the slide deck later, this is a link to it. If you don't understand semantic versioning, the website at this link will tell you everything you want to know about semantic versioning. When you install a package with Bower and save it to your bower.json file, it defaults to using the version range operator with the latest package version number. So if you just type Bower install jQuery -- save, it's going to save an entry in your bower.json file that says this project has a dependency on jQuery at tilde version 2.0.2. When that tilde is applied, the way the semantic versioning scheme works is that that basically means any version between 1.2.3-0, so greater than or equal to 1.2.3-0, and less than 1.3.0-0. So, for example, the project that I'm on right now, there was a situation where we're using Twitter Bootstrap as a UI package. And when we first started the project, this has been actually a pretty long-running project. We've been on it for almost a year now. When we first started it, we installed Twitter Bootstrap using this method. We did bower install bootstrap -- save. And at the time, it installed, I believe it was version 3.0.1 or something like that. Over the course of the project, Twitter Bootstrap got updated. So our bower.json file had an entry for bootstrap at 3.0.1. Over the course of the project, Twitter Bootstrap got updated to, I think it's 1.8, it was 3.0.4 or something like that. And we had some continuous integration processes that would download our repository, and as part of the build process, it would actually execute bower install, and it would install all of the package dependencies. And then once it was done, it would deploy to a staging server that QA people could actually test. Well, we had a UI component that had some elements that were positioned a certain way based on the wireframes we were given. And what happened was there was a bug that was reported because these elements were not aligning the way that they were supposed to based on the wireframes that we were given. And the reason they weren't aligning correctly was because the developer that was working on the project had already installed run bower install, and they had version 3.0.1 on their machine. And they positioned those elements based on the way Twitter Bootstrap positioned those elements at version 3.0.1. The build system, when it ran bower install, was now downloading and installing Bootstrap 3.0.4, which had a change to the CSS that affected the way those elements were positioned on the screen that caused them to be misaligned. So you can see there was multiple different versions being installed here. And that causes a problem. So anytime you subsequently run bower install and it uses that versioning scheme, it can bite you if and when it ends up downloading different versions that are not backwards compatible with the version that was installed at the time the package was initially pulled into the project. That seemed a little bit complicated, and I hope that was clear. If not, ask some questions later. I'll be happy to discuss it with you a little bit more. Based on that experience, though, this is what I recommend based on personal experience. Your mileage may vary, but I now recommend specifying and using fixed package version numbers in your bower.json file. So figure out what version numbers, package numbers are available, and pick a specific one that you want to use, and make sure that it is set as a fixed version number for that package in your bower.json file. This will ensure that everyone that runs bower.install after that initial configuration is always going to get the same version of all the projects, and you won't have these slightly off differences that could come back and bite you. So hopefully that was clear and helpful. It was for us. So now this is what I mean. Bower install jQuery at 1.10.2, and this is what it'll look like in your bower.json file. Notice the lack of the tilde preceding the package number. Okay, I feel better now. I hope that helps save somebody some pain. So where were we? Configuration, yes. We had talked about the Bower RC file. The Bower RC file, the primary thing that I've used this for in the past is really, really useful. It has this directory property that allows you to specify where Bower will install packages when you download them with the client. By default, Bower will put everything that it downloads in a directory called Bower_components. Somebody don't like that. Some people don't like that. Some people like to use vendor. Some people like to use lib. Some people like to use components. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to put them, using a Bower_rc file and the directory property is a really useful way of controlling where Bower puts your packages when you install them. It's one of the most useful things that I found about Bower. It's really nice. The other nice thing, though, too, is that the Bower_rc file is a configuration file where you can specify options for customizing the way Bower behaves, and there's a number of them. You can specify the current working directory, the registry, a proxy, many, many more. This link here will take you to the Bower documentation page for what all those options are that you can use. But the important thing to take away here is that Bower_rc is a file for customizing the way Bower behaves. So if you don't like its default behavior, you can change it, which is really nice. That's one of the many things. One of the primary things that I've heard is that I don't like the way it works out of the box. Well, you can control that. Updating installed packages. This is one of the things that's really, really nice. When you're running Bower list on to show you all the packages that are installed for your project, Bower will actually show you if any of those packages are out of date or if they're not the most recent version. The really nice thing about that is you can use Bower to say, oh, okay, I want to try out the latest version of that. So you want to try and make sure that you haven't let the latest versions don't break anything. Use your version control system to create a new branch, run Bower update. It'll update all your packages to the latest versions based on the way you've got it configured. And then you can test them out. And there's various ways that you can do that. You can say Bower update jQuery, and you can optionally say force it to update. Or the other thing that you can do is you can manually modify your bower.json file. So say you're running jQuery 1.11 and you want to try out 2.0. You can manually go in and change that dependency package number in your bower.json file, and then go back to the command line and just run bower install, and that will install the version based on what's in your bower.json file. So there's two ways that you can do that. But ultimately the point here is updating your packages is super simple. It's a one-line command and you're done. It updates everything for you, and now you're ready to start testing to make sure you haven't broken anything. And I can help you with that. Neither can Bower. Okay, using the cache. So some of you may travel a lot. If you use Bower and you travel, one of the really nice things is most of us use a handful of common libraries across projects. So when you install a package with Bower, it will cache that locally on your machine. So if you're in an offline situation, say you're traveling and you don't have connectivity, and you are working on a project offline and you want to install a package, Bower can use the cached version that you have and still install packages. What it can't do here is install stuff that's not in your cache. So if you've not cached it and you don't have connectivity, you're kind of out of luck. But if you're curious what you do have, you can run this Bower cache list command, and it will show you all of the packages and the version numbers that you've got in your local cache. And if you feel like you've just installed a whole bunch of stuff and you're wasting disk space, you can run Bower cache clean, and it'll just clean that up and remove everything if you want to start from scratch. This is a really useful package that we've done. So with regard to integration with build tools, we use GRUNT for a build process, and we found this package that's really useful. It allows you to run Bower from your GRUNT script. And the nice thing about this is, instead of making getting up and running a multi-step process for new developers on the project and making them, okay, pull the code from source control, run npm install, run Bower install, run grunt, what we can do is we can go in here and in conjunction with another package for installing npm dependencies as well, a user can now just pull the code from version control and just run grunt, and that will automatically execute npm install for you and Bower install, and it will download the packages, and it will also monitor changes to your bower.json. So if you're using grunt watch, for example, anytime you make a change to bower.json, this will detect it and automatically run bower install or bower update to react to the changes that you make to your bower.json file. And the nice thing about this is it can help keep your development team in sync and up to date at all times. And it makes it really easy to keep packages up to date with a simple grunt script. So that's really useful. And when you check out the slides later, this is a link directly to that task, and it has all the documentation. And this is just an example of how we have it configured. Okay, so now we're going to talk, then in the next part we're going to talk about creating and maintaining your own Bower package. But before I do that, I want to run a quick run through from the command line of how to do all the stuff that we've just talked about. So I'm going to switch over here to the command line. I'm going to switch over here, and you can see I'm in a folder called MWC demo. So from here we're going to run Bower init. Okay, so it's going to default to a name called MWC demo. We'll take that. We'll give it a version of 0.1.0. Can you guys all see that? Is the text big enough to be clear to read? Somebody just holler in the chat if it's too small or if you're having trouble. I'm going to leave the put a simple description in here. Main file, we don't have one. I'm going to ignore these, but this is really nice. You can actually go up and select and say there's globals in it. Keywords, we'll leave empty. I'm authoring it. MIT license. We don't have a home page for this. Yes. Yes. Add commonly ignored files so you ignore this. We'll talk about this really later. I really like this feature of Bower. It's really helpful, but ignoring files in your project is really important when you're creating a package that you're distributing to other people. But we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Yes, we want to do this. Okay, does that look good? Yeah, let's go with that. So that just created a bower.json file for us, and that's what it looks like right there. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to install a couple of packages, and as I install those, we'll watch this bower.json file to see how doing various things impacts it. So I'm I am going to I'm going to create a Bower RC file, and I'm going to put everything in the lib directory because that's where I like to keep stuff here. So now I'm going to say Bower install jQuery version 1.11. Notice the first thing it said is not cached. I don't have that version of jQuery cached, so it cached it, it resolved it, it downloaded it, it extracted it, and there you go. So what happened to our bower.json? Oh, nothing happened. Why? Because we forgot to -- save. So let's do that. It's going to say, oh, I've already got it. It's already there. I validated it. Now the only thing that happened is now we have this dependency section in our bower.json file, and it's using version 1.11. So I'm going to go ahead and put this tilde in here and see what that does when I run, let's see, Bower list. I'm going to do Bower list first. And it's going to say, okay, I've got jQuery version 1.11.1, and the latest is 2.1.1. So what happens, I updated this and I put the tilde in there. What happens if we run Bower update? Nothing happened there. Okay, I still have the same version installed. What happens if we say version 1.9? Okay. So now we have Bower version 1.9.1 installed. If I change this to 2, okay, so now we have version 2.1.1 installed, and it's going to leave it at that. If we say 2.0, and list it, now we've got 2.0.3, and the latest is 2.1.1. Okay, so that's probably sufficient. The next thing that I wanted to show too is what it looks like if you install, or if you want to install a package that has dependencies. So I know of one here. I'm going to say Bower info Sycamore. Okay, so this is nice. It's saying, you know, we've got this. The latest version is 0.3.6. Oh, it has dependencies on jQuery. Greater than or equal 1.10 and underscore 1.5. So let's install that one and see what happens. Okay, so it installed those. Sycamore, good to go. Okay, so now we've got jQuery 2.03, Sycamore, and then under that it also pulled in jQuery and underscore. Let's take a look at what is in our lib folder. See, it's putting everything in this lib folder. So we've got jQuery installed, we've got Sycamore installed, and we've got underscore installed. So we're good to go. It's keeping track of everything. If I remove that, so now we're in a situation where this looks just like a new developer, just like it would to a new developer that pulled this down. They don't have anything installed. If they run Bower install, pulls everything down, we're good to go. Let's run Bower list. Everything's there, and everything's there. Okay. If there's any questions about the demo or anything else you would like to see, let me know. I can come back to this a little bit later. But I'm going to switch back to the slides, and we're going to talk about creating and maintaining your own Bower package. All right, looks like we're running close. If I run through this too fast, slow me down or get with me after. I'm going to start with some fundamentals. We'll talk about what your Bower.json should look like and the package contents, how to register it, and then keeping it up to date. The first and foremost important thing to understand here is that Bower is built on top of Git. You can't distribute your package through Bower without it being hosted at some Git endpoint somewhere, whether it be on GitHub, self-hosted with GitLab or something like that, or on Bitbucket. And when applying versions for Bower packages are just Git tags. So a new package version is just a tag in your repository against a change set. That's really important to remember. So bare bones minimum, you create a Bower.json file. This is an example of how you could create one manually. It's just got a name and a version number in it. We talked about Bower init. That's by far the easier way to create your file. Package contents. Now, this is something that I think is really, really important. By default, if you don't specify anything, the really nice thing is Bower init now defaults to asking if you want to ignore certain files. And I always say yes to that. Before it didn't do that, and the ignore directive for your Bower.json file was always there. It just didn't create it by default when Bower init ran. But it's really, really important because as a consumer of a package, you don't want it to pull down the entire Git repository for your package. Most users aren't going to want things like unit tests and, the libraries that you have included. It's going to download those dependencies anyway. You don't want it to download that extra junk. So you make liberal use of the ignore attribute in your bower.json file to tell consumers what parts of the Git repository can be ignored and not downloaded. Only include what consumers of your package need to be able to use it. And I think this is really important because it helps keep from cluttering up package consumers' directories with a bunch of stuff that they're never going to use related to your package. So I think this is really important. Again, when it comes to registering your package, remember Bower package versions are just Git tags. That's all they are. So remember to tag your repository. And the one thing that I always forgot early on was push those tags to your repository remote. That's easy to forget. First few times that I did this, I would create a tag, and then I would push the code up to my remote, but I didn't actually pass the tags. And so the versions never actually got there. It's important to remember when you push to your remote, use this -- tags flag, and that'll push any tags that you create locally up to your remote, which will make those versions of your package available up there. Once you've done that, though, it's really, really simple. Executing this command right here will register your package in a Bower registry. So Bower register, the name of your package, and the Git endpoint that it lives at. It's that simple. It really is really easy. Once you've got it out there, though, the tricky part comes in actually maintaining it. If you're like me, and I know I'm the exception here, you guys are all probably perfect and you develop your libraries so that they never need change. They're awesome the first time around. But people like me that need to realize that things are broken at first and there's things that need to be fixed and new features that need to be added later, need a way to be able to maintain it. So there's really 5 steps. I try to make this as simple as possible, but first thing you need to do is make and save the changes to your package or code. Pretty simple. We all do that. Update the version number in your bower.json file. There's a couple ways you can do this. The obvious one is to do it manually, but there's also some tools that can help you do this in an automated fashion that can be helpful, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. But you need to update the version in your bower.json file. Commit your changes to your repository. Tag your repository with the new version number, and then push those changes to your remote. And don't forget to use the -- tags flag when you push. And then you're done. That's really maintaining a package in a nutshell. Like I said, 5 steps. It may seem like a lot, but most of them are pretty obvious. You got to make changes to your code, and then just push those changes to your repository remote. When those changes are pushed, anytime somebody runs Bower info on your package later, it will include that new version in the results that it shows at the command line. So that's done. You're it. That's how you verify that the new version is out there, by saying Bower info your package name, and it should show you the new version that you just pushed, and you'll be good to go. There's some tools that you can use to help you with this. GitHub Releases is one of them. So if you're using GitHub to host your package, GitHub has the feature of releases. Basic releases is a web interface on GitHub for tagging your repository. It'll automatically generate a tag your repository for you. And then there's also a GRUNT package that I use called GRUNT Bump, which is really, really useful. It can save some steps for you. It's really flexible how you can configure this GRUNT Bump, but I like it because it can automate updating not only your package.json file, but also your bower.json file. It can automate tagging your repository for you, and it can even, if you want, automate pushing to your remote as well. So with one simple grunt command here, you can generate a new version number, update the configuration files, commit those changes to your local repository, add a tag to your local repository, and push to your remote all in one step. It's a really useful grunt extension that I've used, and it can save you some time if you get into this. And I think I'm 2 minutes early, which I think is perfect for some questions. Anybody have any questions? Let's see. What are you doing with the other files and folders in the downloaded packages? For example, you're downloading jQuery. I typically just leave stuff there. With stuff that is, hopefully everybody can see in the question that was asked in the chat. With regards to that, I typically just leave stuff there. Whatever comes down with it, it can be removed manually, but anytime you run update or somebody else runs install, it's all going to get put back anyway because it's just downloading the package from GitHub. So I usually don't mess with it. As for picking the jQuery.min file, that totally depends on how you're developing your application. This is one of the complaints that I've seen with Bower is that it doesn't. So like with NPM, right? With NPM, you can install a package and go straight into a file and say require whatever library was downloaded. Bower doesn't necessarily allow you to do that, and there's a lot of people that think that it's deficient because of that. There are a number of different ways that you can architect a modular JavaScript application. You might be using AMD and require JS. You might be using Browserify. You might be using something else different altogether. You might just be using script references in an HTML file. Every single one of those methods is a different approach for how to make assets and resources available in your application. And so Bower has no way of knowing which of those methods you're using. And so typically, Bower is just going to download it and make those available to you from a consistent location. It's up to you to configure your, require JS config file or your Browserify script or whatever it is you may be using relative to where those packages live in your directory. So I hope that answers your question. I hope that makes sense. With regard to the other stuff that comes with a package, I typically just leave it there and just kind of ignore it. I'm going to jump back here. The Grunt Bower task plugin was mentioned, makes it possible to move a subset of what is downloaded to the directory where you want it. I was not even aware of that, actually. We're using that plugin, but I didn't know it had that feature, so that's good information to know, Matt. Thank you for sharing that.